Senator Lyons.
Deputy President, if it wasn't so serious, it would be amusing being invited to be on the Liberal team. We're in the Labor team. But today, in question time, it was as if Mr Hockey isn't the Treasurer anymore. We barely heard his name mentioned. And today on Sky News, it seemed that Senator Birmingham well and truly outlined the Abbott government's economic credentials when he said Joe Hockey, and I quote, "Joe Hockey will deliver a budget that continues to show a steady trajectory back towards deficit." Now, anyone that can work out what Senator Birmingham meant when he said that quote, yes, that's what he said, back towards deficit. So finally, we have a frontbencher acknowledging the chaos and dysfunction of the Abbott government. They can't even get their message right. And then Mr Barnaby said of Mr Hockey, Mr Barnaby Joyce, sorry, thank you, Senator Conroy. I don't want him cartwheeling around in front of the media. I want him behind his desk. So here we have Mr Hockey being accused of doing cartwheels. Mr Hockey has been described in the media as the phantom treasurer. Mr Hockey has been described as being the hole in the heart of the Abbott government. And what about that awkward photo last week? That awkward photo of our Prime Minister and our Treasurer. Thank goodness I'm not in that team. That awkward hand on the arm. Now, what was that about? It certainly looked to me as if the Treasurer was not part of the story, was definitely not part of the story. And where have the key budget announcements come from? Well, they certainly haven't come from Mr Hockey. They've come largely from Mr Morrison. So perhaps Mr Morrison is the Treasurer who will take up that formal role once the budget's out. So we've had Mr Morrison and the Prime Minister indeed making all of the announcements. We certainly haven't seen very much of Mr Hockey at all, except Mr Hockey's quoted in the media as saying, and I quote, "The electorate realised that good policy needs to be implemented." They sure have, because we know that voters in Australia have lost complete faith that the Abbott government is ever going to deliver good policy. The Australian voters sure know that, and they know that good policy hasn't been delivered since this government was elected, and they know the Abbott government is absolutely incapable of delivering good policy. And here we are, I think for the first time in our history, we are still debating last year's budget. On the eve of the next budget, the second budget of the Abbott government, here we are still with an unsettled budget from last year. And what we've seen from the government is backflips on budgets. You know, we were going to have this GP tax, but suddenly, after day in, day out in this parliament where we attacked the government, we saw the backflip on that, although I don't think we've seen the last of that. I think there will be a GP tax at some point. We've seen the government have to be bludgeoned into backflipping on some of its more harsh budget measures. For example, where is the budget measure to have young people under 30 not be eligible for a payment for 6 months? Presumably that's still in a drawer somewhere. Is that going to be trying to sneakily come out? And this whole absolute dishonesty around cuts to pensions. If you change the way that pensions are calculated in a way that reduces the pensioner's entitlement, that is a cut. If you are used to getting $200 into your bank account and you suddenly start to get $180, that is a cut. And yet, day after day, we see the Abbott government trying to put a spin on it, trying to say to Australian pensioners, no, we're not cutting your pension. Well, they know better. And what about the dishonesty to superannuation in this country, where the employer contribution's been frozen? That's a cut too. From a government who tries to pretend it's responsible. It's not. All we've seen from the Abbott government is that they can't manage anything. They can't manage their front bench, they can't manage their Prime Minister, they can't manage their treasurer. Hiding them away means they're still there.
Order, Senator. Your time has expired. The question is that the motion moved by Senator Cameron be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against say no. I think the ayes have it. Are there further motions to take note of answers?